I want to welcome everyone to our event tonight. Permission granted by Regina Louise. And just do a little introduction here. Um, this is This is going to be an inspiring conversation about her debut nonfiction book, Permission Granted. Regina will outline a proven path for transforming past um, disappointments into motivations and even into momentum. A little bit about Regina Louise. She's the author of Permission Granted, but also the author of two best-selling memoirs, Someone, and Has Led This Child to Believe. They were made into a award-winning Lifetime movie, I Am Somebody's Child, the Regina Louise story, which was nominated for a 2020 NAACP award for Best Director. She is a summa cum laude graduate of the California Institute of Integral Studies with the Master's of Fine Arts degree. You may know her if you are familiar with the speaking circuit. She's a wonderful motivational speaker. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. So we here at Source Booksellers loved her memoirs and wanted her to come visit us for so long. And so now we have our wish to not only have this event, but to have her with us, even though it's virtual, to speak with us. So make sure to get your questions ready. And if you're on YouTube, we'll be checking that as well. But we're going to begin with a conversation with Janet Jones, the owner of Source Booksellers, and Miss Regina Louise. We originally planned to have Angela, let me see if I can get this right. Angela Farley with us today, but she was not able to attend. So we get to hog Regina Louise to ourselves here at Source Booksellers. So let's bring in Janet Jones. And Miss Regina Louise. Thank you both for joining us, and let's talk about the fantastic Permission Granted, and just my reading of it. And I'm going to stop talking because I've been talking a lot. I love the examples, and I also love the to-do steps. So I'll get off here, and thank you so much. I'll be listening with everyone else.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you so much, Regina Louise, for being with us here in Detroit, even though you are in the Bay Area right now. Is that right?
That's right. I'm in what we call the Yay area.
The Yay area.
The Yay area, yay!
And it's just a marvel of the technology and the virtual capacity and the result of this happening because of the pandemic that we've been able to really stretch. It's almost like we can fly from one place to another and be with each other in places that we just haven't expected. So Source Booksellers is so happy to have you here. I remember meeting you early on when your book, Someone Needs to Tell This Child. No, who has led this child to believe? I remember so well meeting you. I think it was at BEA or the Winter Institute,
Winter Institute.
Winter Institute, right. And at that point, we really said, we want her to come to Detroit. Is there some way we can do it? But we're all learning to walk now again. And we had been crawling and walking before, but this is a whole new time period for all of us to sort of start again catch up with things that we haven't done, and then add on new things. So I am totally grateful and delighted and that we get a chance to have you and to have your new book, Permission Granted.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So I want to start, Regina, with this Permission Granted book. And first of all, it's a beautiful book, and I love the title very much, but I also love the second title, or the side title, Kick-Ass Strategies. I love it. To bootstrap your way to an unconditional self-love. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful title. And what a great intro and opening to a subject that's so, so very important.
Yes.
Just today at the store, a young man came in, and we didn't share this book with him, but he's coming back, and I think it'll be a good one to share with him because he's really looking for answers just like this. And I think that the pandemic has caused many people to begin to search and look more deeply into their selves and their own self needs. So I think this is really right on the mark. So what I'd like to do, first of all, you have many good citations in the book from people. And what I was struck with was this beautiful dedication that you did. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to ask you to please talk about it a little bit and expand on it. So this is part of the dedication that Regina Louise has in the book, Permission Granted. And to my biological mother, who transitioned during the last few days of my final rewrite in January 2021. So it's very fresh. You are the most unpretentious, unapologetic, life on your own terms human I've ever met. Your terms were so fierce that they taught me to be the wild thing that could not afford to feel sorry for herself or for too long. And for this, I'm truly grateful. Thank you for giving me a life worth living, worth examining, and worth transforming into something to write about. Where the hurting ends, the healing begins. Here's to healing the world's hearts. That is so beautiful to me, Regina. Will you talk about how you came to say this about your biological mother and expand a little bit on it for us?
Ooh.
Ooh.
You go right to it, right?
Yep.
Oh, Janet, you're like, let's leave no emotional stone unturned
Right.
out of the gate.
That's right.
Right. Well, so as the dedication says, my biological mother transitioned January 15th to 2021. I received a message via Facebook because of my movie. So many of the people whom I was estranged from as a child because of the movie, one person said, I think that's Gina, and then the next person. And so all the estranged people, many of whom I lived with as a little girl, including my two estranged brothers, estranged 40, 50 years, found me. And the one brother in particular reached out and said on January 15th, he just gave me the name of the hospital, Seton, room 425. And then he said, Mom isn't expected to make it through the weekend. And for a moment, I was shocked because I'm like, is he saying the mom that was his mom is also my mom? Even though I know we are all born of her, he had a completely different mother than I had, right? The fact that he knew the hospital room and the hospital number and all of that, to me, telegraphed that we didn't have the same mother. I mean, why wouldn't I have known my mother was at death's door, a long time prior. Mm-hmm. So of course, I'm thinking things out and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is the moment I've waited for, that moment that I thought I would rip all my hair out, the moment that I thought that I would run down the street, stark raving mad, and no one would understand because no one would know the depth to which I loved her, the depth to which I ached for her, the depth to which I had to let her go over a course of 50 7 years. I thought, I will never be ready for that. And then that day came. I would say to my partner, oh my goodness, if my mother goes, just be prepared to call 5150 me, because I'm going to come undone. And my partner's like, why? I was like, that's a good question. And I didn't recognize the degree of healing that I had, right? That was just a little girl talking. And so that day, January 15th happened. I didn't know what to do, because I am a teacher of social, psycho-spiritual healing. And in being that teacher, one of the things we tell our students at the end of a 7-day retreat, where they go basically and reclaim their lives from their childhood, one of the things that I oftentimes say is, sometime within the next year, go to your parents and ask them, don't even ask them for forgiveness, just go to your parents and say, I love you. So I had planned as a teacher, I've been teaching this for quite a while. And it was this year that I thought, I'm going to go to my mother. I will not allow her fierceness, her sharp teeth. I will not allow that to intimidate me anymore. I'm going to her, and I'm going to find a way to get close enough to grab her hand and say, sweet woman, child, I love you. And so here we are, January 15th. I make the call. I didn't know I had it in me to make the call. Am I mature enough? Is the hurt girl in me grownish enough to do what needs to happen? It needs to happen. I make the call, and the nurse picked up, and I heard the cadence of the ventilator in the background. She was in a COVID-19 unit. And all this information is coming in, and this beautiful nurse who had what sounded like a Jamaican accent was talking to me in that way. And it was sort of simultaneously breaking my heart, but holding my heart, because I knew that my mother wasn't alone. And as the only thing I could think to do, I had never called my mother Mama. I always called her by her first name, Maddie. And I just thought, do I give her that on her death? Is this her deathbed? I mean, this is all coming in really fast. And I'm thinking, what do I do? And I just thought, I need to be true. I need to be true to who I am. I will not abandon myself, even in the face of this. I cannot. So let me do what feels right, but not at my own expense. So here we are. And I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. The nurse says, tell her you love her. And I think, no, I'm not going to let somebody tell me what to say. So I just started with, I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, Maddie, when did you last just let your heart desire? I sang that to her. And then I just said, I love you. We are so good. We are clean. We are free. You are the sweetest little girl in the world. You are the sweetest woman. You are completely forgiven. I love you. I love your essence. I love your preciousness. I loved your fierce and humble, and you're going to get me crying here.
It's okay. It's all right.
Your way of tearing through this life and doing the best in the face of your own unexamined traumas, to just get through bit by bit, fingernail by fingernail, tooth by tooth. So I knew the truth of her, the depth of her pain, because I'm a living example of it. The difference being, I've chosen to examine, to be with, to befriend. And so I recognize that my mother died 3 days later. And it was the first time in my life, first of all, that I receive flowers. I've lost every single relative. I mean, you can only imagine generations of people, and never had I been included in any of the wakes, in the funeral, none of that stuff. I don't even know the language of all that, the different things that they do. And it was the first time, Janet, that I received condolences. I received sympathy. And it was brilliant. And it was life altering, because it was also the first time I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel ashamed that my mother was leaving. It was the first time in my life that I could recognize that my mother is gone and I'm not to blame. It doesn't mean anything about me. I'm not bad. My mother is gone for the first time in my life. And for the first time in my life, I know where my mother is.
What clarity you received at that time. Such clarity. And I was thinking how adult and womanly and lovingly you spoke of her. And I know I want to ask you more about your early background, but that just struck me so much when I read it. It took courage and empathy to write those words as you did. So I give you a lot of credit for that, given the things that you do. And you can tell more if you wish about your own life and journey. But I do also, so thank you very much for that. I know that was quite to the point right away, but I do like to go there so that we can have a ground to step upon. In your book, you use the word in the title. This word permission runs throughout the book. You stand on it, you speak about it, you perceive it, you give it, you do so much with this word permission. So what preceded your use of the word, your understanding of the word? What came before your ability to take on that word?
You know, so many things, but I remember being in conversation with Robin Roberts of Good Morning America. And, you know, I was sitting across from her and she asked me, what is it that you would tell your younger child now, your inner child? And, you know, I launched into a rendition of Don't Stop Believing because I wasn't quite sure how to answer that question, because we had practiced the questions that we would answer, and you know how it goes in those moments. And I later returned to my hotel room and I'm like, wait, if I were to ask that question differently, how would I have, what's the question that I've been aching to answer? You know, sometimes I save and I said, this is the question Oprah is going to ask me. And I write that question down, put it in my journal, and then just say, one day that will happen. But that question was, how did you get yourself from where you were to where you are now? Because for me, that's a very powerful question. And in that hotel room, I said, had she asked me that, I would have said, by giving myself permission and taking the power of my own consent, taking the power of anybody having authority over me, taking the power of anybody having license to tell me what to do or how to do it from them. And I'm going to give it to myself. So that's what preceded it, is the necessity to take the power of my sovereignty away from dysfunctional adults who mismanaged their right to manage me.
Permission granted.
Yeah. So I had to step into it. I had to be my own permission. I had to live my own permission. You know, there were times when I was in solitary confinement. Me and Nelson Mandela were in solitary confinement at the same time, different ages, for not such different reasons. Civil liberties being violated, the right to be a sovereign being within the realm of this idea of Du Bois's double consciousness, right? That world that I'm separate from, that hyphenated status, right? And how to be both and, how to be both a Black girl American, right? And to occupy those spaces freely, of my own volition, on my own terms. And he, for different political reasons in his native South Africa, but we both wanted a sense of equality, right? We both wanted a sense of equanimity, a sense of dignity, like just, and so then for me, it was like, no more of this. I'm not going to wait for you to dignify my presence, for you to validate my existence. We're done with that.
Right.
And that's where this sense of permission comes from for me, is just knowing when people did not have my best interest at heart, and knowing that I could do a better job. I loved, as a young girl, giving myself the challenge when people would say, oh, she's going to be a statistic, or, they would say things on the dig about Black people, Black girls, how I would probably end up like my mother, having a bunch of children by a bunch of men, and, just scaling the illegitimacy that threatened to swallow me up. And I just thought, no, good luck with that. I mean, clearly you're talking about yourselves. That's not about me.
Right.
You haven't asked me about me.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing to me how such wisdom can be churned up in a youthful mind, even though it may not be well spoken or fleshed out real well, but that wisdom was certainly there, that interest of self above those kinds of critical, demeaning activities and words, because words pierce our hearts so much. And as a young person, I think that our tendency to be critical of children is just so dangerous. I don't care who you are, what you have, or how important you think your life is. Criticizing children is a very demeaning behavior, and certainly has such consequences for everybody in time to come. Right. I often think about Shirley Chisholm. When you were thinking about permission, I also thought about power. She's one of my people I like to look to hear. And she said, you have power, use it.
Right.
She did. And it's true, we have power, and the power is within us to do for ourselves and hopefully for others what needs to be done for the greatest good.
Absolutely. I like to think that I am the power. I like, in my life, there were times when, I didn't recognize that I was a victim of so many different unmitigated circumstances. I didn't recognize that. But what I have always sensed in me is this power for good, this power that, I am one of these people. I don't need those pats on the back in order to feel validated or feel that I'm doing good work, because for me, the good work, the intention, the motivation behind the good work is I'm a good person. So what I do in the world, how I show up, how I roll is evidence in the works that I do. And in those works, it's an opportunity to do so from my sense of goodness, so that I get that felt sense of my worth. That's how I see it.
Right. Dr. Margaret Paul was influential in your life. And I see that she did the foreword. Yes. And her work struck me as having a lot of fundamentals in the Ayurvedic systems. And so can you say a little bit about how you came to know her and how you were influenced by some of her work?
Right. So I am very aware of the traumas that have, in many ways, carved my life, informed my life. I would be remiss if I did not admit that on the ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experience Assessment Test, there are only 10 possible. 10 is the highest score. I scored 9 out of 10. So I'm well aware of the hardships and the probabilities that a life like mine could run into. And so being aware, I have always wanted to get ahead of potential fallout from my childhood. I mean, I didn't have an adult in my life from the time I was 18 till in my 40s. I mean, I had no adults. So if I were to look at that, any person I know, I don't know anyone else who has had that experience. So I didn't have so in a way, it was like I had this sense of arrested development. Okay, starting at probably going into solitary confinement. So around 15, this arrested development, like my development emotionally became arrested to some degree. So I knew that I would need to find ways to grow myself, to keep myself growing, to find a way to keep fortifying that emotional space within me. It was just natural. I was just naturally drawn to Rollo May, to Dr. Brazelton, you know, where I would learn to reparent myself. I found my way naturally to all of these metaphysical geniuses in my 20s and my 30s, from Rollo May to Dr. Terry Brazelton helped me raise my child, raise myself, Carolyn Meese. And so, and then later in my 40s, late 40s, I found Dr. Margaret Paul, because I knew that some of the fallout from the life I lived left me terrified, just terrified. Like terror rode shotgun with me every day, went to sleep with me at night, awoke with me. I mean, terror to the point where I began to question whether or not I had a personality disorder. Terror that made me paranoid. I was always running from something, you know, and like I couldn't live alone. I couldn't take a shower. I mean, the panic. So that kind of thing does not happen unless, of course, something has happened. And that which had happened, I'm going to say, happened pre-verbal.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it was a sustained happening, whatever it was. And then you add abandonment and foster care and solitary confinement. So compounded trauma. So not only do I have this ACE score of 9, but then as a young adult, all the way up, these compounded traumas. And it just got to a point where I thought, I want to learn to be alone with my aloneness. I want to be worthy of my aloneness. And if I don't grow myself up enough, if I don't heal enough to understand the language of my aloneness, I will be subject to be victimized by my aloneness, by the terror. I will become a victim of a hostage of the terror. So Margaret came along at a time with inner bonding, where I learned some practices and tools to stay connected to myself, because one of the fingers, if you will, of trauma, one of the veins is, you know, this sense of disconnection, leaving the body, so to speak, this sense of losing touch with one's felt sense of self, depersonalizing. So I knew that my trauma was extensive enough, deep enough, that I would need to go to the big guns, you know, because I had done therapy. I've been in therapy 45 years. Most of my life has been mitigated by therapy. Most of the relationships that I have had that have been long and enduring, that have staying power, have been the relationships that were cultivated in a therapeutic milieu.
So fortunate that you were able to find her, because her her system, her ways of doing, takes another turn away from what we perceive as therapy to
Yeah.
a more inner self-development.
Right, right. Because for me, and so then from there, Buddhism,
Mhm.
and then from there, as I said, I am a teacher with what is known as the Hoffman process.
Mhm.
And that probably I would say, brought all the various therapeutic modalities all under one roof.
Mhm.
And it gave me an opportunity to investigate my relationship to
Mhm.
deep, deep patterns that are epigenetic, that are generational, that reach through the generations and leave those what I call epigenetic fingerprints, and this sense of this emotional signature. And what I came to see is I really, and I didn't know it because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you this, what I had experienced was so unusual in terms of experiencing it, but not losing my life to it, right? I owned a salon, a hair salon. And at the hair salon, it was a beautiful salon at sort of like a penthouse suite in a historical building in one of the most robust shopping districts of San Francisco Union Square. And I'll never forget, I was in my 30s and still young about the world, but I could get through creatively, so I tapped into that. And I'll never forget when somebody recommended a group of beautiful young African American women to come to me, and they were graduates of Spelman, Howard, Hampton, and they had all been hired to work for the Gap for a management training program. I mean, I had so many of these women. It blew my mind. Like, it blew my mind and broke my heart that they had mothers and fathers who loved them. They had houses in the Hamptons. They came from a world that was completely, it was like another world. I had no idea, zero, not a zilch, that there was a class, that there were humans that looked like me, that just had normal lives, that their parents loved them. Like, they didn't come from terror and torture and crazy stuff. And I just remember thinking, I want to heal. These young women are so intact and they feel loved and they feel seen, and they are daddy's girls and mama's girls. Is it possible for me to give myself that kind of a connection, that kind of a feeling, without having had the experiences? So for me, my journey has been, how do I normalize my own experience on my own terms so that the story I tell isn't isn't one that for the rest of my life will be that my heart is broken, but one where I can say, yeah, it started that way. But by grace and grit and determination, and I want to be the poster child for, she believed she could and she did. She persevered. It's like, I want to be that girl that is my own girl. I want to be my own favorite child. I want to be my own best mother. I want to be, yeah. So I believe that I have accomplished that.
Yeah. I love the way you say that, because we tend to think that you start away and you're going to end up that way, or there's no change in life. But good grief, the human being is highly plastic. We can move and change our ways in all directions all of our life. And you don't have to be young to get it, and you don't have to be old before you get it. but that ability to change, that's why I'm very interested in your work with Paul and all these other places that I have some interest in too, because they say, you can do it. You can do things that you don't expect that you could do, or that someone told you couldn't do.
Oh
But
my
the
God.
human being is possible. There's unlimited possibilities that can happen to us all through life. I used to work with a young woman who was from Colombia, South America, and they say children need to learn a language when they're young. I said, no, they don't, because she learned English. She
Hey,
was a
right?
grown woman,
Mhm.
So we have all kinds of opportunities to grow and stretch throughout life and to be the human that we can be, or as I heard someone say, be the earthling that we can be.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could just keep talking to you because I love the way you talk and how you talk about, and very openly and freely, and your past vulnerability. I think when I hear you talking, that being vulnerable um, has its drawbacks when you have a lot of burdens. But as we enrich ourselves and grow, I think vulnerability is an opportunity for us to grow. What do you think?
You know, vulnerability is an interesting
Mhm,
construct.
mhm,
It it takes it takes, in my opinion, a a lifetime of accumulating psychological safety,
mhm,
because there are spaces we just should not be vulnerable in.
mhm,
Vulnerability, for me at least, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me at least, vulnerability is something that I I need to know that I have access to my psychological safety. I have access to safety, period. That I am going to be in a space where my vulnerability will not be exploited,
mhm,
that my vulnerability will be seen and heard, that those with whom I'm engaging with, depending upon what that vulnerability is being used to mitigate, to create, translate, create some kind of a movement.
mhm,
Vulnerability, in my opinion, for the sake of vulnerability in certain spaces, can be dangerous,
mhm,
can be self-harming, can be
mhm,
naive.
mhm,
Vulnerability and naivete together can cause harm where we are not aware of, and solving for second and third degrees of consequences. So I believe, for me, when I know that I have psychological safety in my metaphorical backpack and vulnerability is called for, then that's a place I can go to on my own terms with my own permission. Vulnerability that is unconscious, that is forced, that is set up in a toxic way, can be exploited, can be used against someone. But vulnerability, that openness, that trusting place where we can say our truth, we can bring all of who we are, I'm pretty convinced there must be profound safeguards in place, especially when engaging with other people, to make sure that that vulnerability does not get exploited. Now, I work at times being just vulnerable, recognizing my own vulnerability,
mhm,
and being in tandem and in relationship with my own vulnerability, right? That is very different
mhm,
than engaging in that kind of energy, that kind of space, not knowing if everybody else is also in that space. So it's an interesting
yeah. Thank you for that. I love the term psychological safety. That's so beautiful. And in this pandemic time, people keep saying, be safe, be safe. And I always think, but we are safe within ourselves. Other things can't make us safe like we think.
There it is.
Yeah,
That's
I'm so glad that you're a teacher. I just love that, and that you're sharing your life, your experiences, and your knowledge with other people. I know you have some good strategies in here. So did you find a little something that you can either read to us or a strategy that you can share with us before we go to the question?
yeah. So you know what? I have two things that I'm going to do.
Okay.
So one thing is I want to read this. So
What
where
page are you on?
I gotta find it.
Okay.
Okay. So it's introduction. Welcome, dear reader. I have to do that. I love that. So
Okay.
it'll be the bottom of page 1, and then we will end at the first paragraph of page 2.
Good.
So this is to the reader. Welcome, dear reader, which precedes this paragraph. Throughout this permission manifesto, I will lavishly reiterate the importance of having a life on your terms. Your life is yours to decide how you want to live it. The way I see it is, if I'm not living from the standpoint that my life is just as meaningful as that of every other human being on the planet, then I'm nowhere in the vicinity of living my best life. I may as well be on the bleachers, on the sidelines, in the attic, peering out through the dormer window. If I'm not aware that I have the right to recognize that my existence is all about me, then I may as well be doomed to make it all about everyone else. And believe me when I say, I have a lot of tenure in that department. If I'm not willing to take my life into my own hands and fashion it into some semblance of excellence, the same as I would encourage those I love and support to do, I may as well assign myself to perpetually ask the question, what about me? Again, been there and nearly drowned in all that. And sometimes, we may find ourselves as both the swimmer in distress and the lifeguard we need to become in order to save ourselves. So, another thing that I want to share with you is in my book, I talk about love formations, but I need to get something. So do not move. I have to do this because it's important. So just hold tight.
Okay. I think we're going to have some questions coming in too.
Okay, so we'll get those in just a second. So in my marketing efforts to get this book out there to people, I created a self-love toolkit, okay? And within that self-love toolkit, because I think it's so important, especially as women, as Black women, so I created an unconditional self-love toolkit. And there are many things inside. And I collaborated, there's this great candle for having me time with Southern Elegance. So they created a nice little candle that one can use in order to just set the tone for self-care, you know. And then I have this bottle of grace. It was created by Twisted Oils. I am a firm believer in creating an emotional baseline. So I will take my favorite essential oil, put it in my Cupid's bow right there, sit in a meditative state, meditate on the qualities of the moment, on the scent, get it into my mind so that when I come up against situations that may trigger me, I already have an emotional baseline for that. So instead of going to the left and coming at you and going off, what I'll then do is go to my baseline and come back to center. And then one of my most favorite, I have so many exercises, but one of them that I love is I created this mirror. And it has on it, my daily love formations. Dear younger self, I am good enough. You are good enough. Today, I am my own healing. And I will look in this mirror and do the love formations that I need in order to shore myself up and get through a day, a week, a situation. So, yeah.
Good. Okay, Allison, we may have some questions, and we can come on, you can come on and help us with those, because I've been asking all the questions.
I started chatting so much at the beginning, and then you got to have your turn for this fantastic conversation. I don't.
What is
What we have a question. What is the most important thing you want someone who's going through a hard time to know?
To know that to find the way within you to believe that there is nothing you can go through that is larger than your spirit can help you through.
Mm.
I have a strategy that says grow through what you go through, to know that the resilience that is inherent in spirit, and that you are a chip off of that there's a blueprint of resilience. There's a blueprint of growing through what you go through that is coded into the essence of who you are as a sovereign spiritual being. To never forget that, and it's easy to forget, and then find those people who are exemplary of having overcome these seemingly unconscionable, difficult situations. I think one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I couldn't find the book that I needed to speak to the difficulties I had encountered that were not all steeped in either white middle class experiences, right? Mostly, or experiences where it didn't speak to my particular way of going through. I think, I look at all the books in terms of, there's Iyanla Vanzant and then there's Lisa Nichols, as far as I know. When I do the research of the new thought leaders, of the thought leaders around healing and metaphysics and spiritual growth, mindset challenges, it's only recently that we as Black people have had an opportunity to even have a voice in this space. And given that there are so few of us who have had an opportunity, right, to be in this space, to create a following, to have our voices, our particular ways of getting through the world in our own emotional signatures manifested on a universal or global scale, I thought, you know what? I love Carolyn Myss, thank you. I love this one and I love that one. But you know what? When I show up at these events, 1,500 people deep, and I'm one of 2 Black people, come on now. I can be a Dwayne Dwyer. I can be any of these people. I have come through some things and transmuted so much of my own difficulty into wisdom. So I've written the book that I've always wanted, that has a feminine approach, that is this idea that this cover is about an explosion of life and love and color and joy and possibility. And it's interesting, if we look at the kick-ass strategies to bootstrap your way to unconditional self-love, it's in yellow intentionally, because that's the hope. That's the gift, is that you get to do this. And I'm not about to give you permission to do it, because that's none of my business. So what I am going to do is live my life in such a way that you will invite yourself into your own permission to do it on your own terms. Hashtag that.
Yes. Yes, good for you. And
I,
good for us for having you with us. Allison, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where did you get the bootstrap takeaways? I
Wow.
really like them, but I just was wondering, like, where did you get the idea
Right.
to offer those?
So when I didn't know how to write a self-help book, and I was lost, and I couldn't find books to help me write a self-help book without it sounding too much like the white males or the white women. I just didn't want anything like that. I just wanted something different. And I thought about Stagecoach Mary.
Mm,
And I thought about how she was no joke, how she made no apologies, how she talked about she's got a big black cigar, she carry a gun, she drank a whiskey, she does what she wants to. And if you have a problem with that, I just thought, now that is an example that predates me of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which supposedly was that kind of American saying that was meant for the hard scrabble. You're going to pull yourself up no matter what happened. You're going to pull yourself up. Like, this is America. The least you can do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so I imagined, as I went through and I picked the different epigraphs, I imagined all of these people began somewhere. I began somewhere. I know that as a pioneer, I look at myself as an emotional, spiritual pioneer.
mhm.
And what I mean by that is to give myself permission is to be a pioneer of permission, because that's how I've lived. And what I have done unabashedly and unapologetically, I from the bottom of that concrete floor in solitary confinement, where all I had many a day to speak to is the light that came in over the threshold of that door where I planted my future and my promises. There was many a day that I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps and create a way where there wasn't one. There was no booklet. There was no handout, information, nothing to show me how to get through the life I was assigned to. So I had to create a way. And the only way that I knew, given that my life felt so wild, it felt so, I was always on the frontier of having to recreate and reinvent everything because I was an orphan. I thought, how did the pioneers do this? Oh, they bootstrap. Oh, Stagecoach Mary, let's go.
Well, the thing that I love about that too, Regina, is that that behavior is in our DNA as Black people. We haven't written about it. And because of one of our categories at Source Booksell is metaphysical and spiritual books, I search for books by women in particular that are metaphysically oriented and talk about these kind of things. So that's why I'm doubly glad that we are able to have you here. And there are only a few, but our history is that we've figured out ways of doing things in spite of everything. And
And
here we are.
baby,
So now
that,
writing about it is good.
I want to say that, like, to me, this is sort of like a eulogy, right? To, I mentioned Stagecoach Mary, but really, we are here. Like, that's a whole other book that I get speechless. I get tongue tied when I think of the brilliance, the genius, I am certain that we as Black people are the soul of America. We are the soul. We are the felt sense, the rhythm, the hue, the collard green cornbread. We are the banjo, right? We are the harmonica, right? We are the rap. We are the tap. We are the soul of America, of this thing that we're doing in this space of being hyphenated Americans. So yes, we have bootstrapped it and double bootstrapped it, badass, kick-ass bootstrapped it, okay? That is our heritage. And so it felt like a natural place to begin again. And it was wild for me to think, I live in the richest country in the world. I raised myself. Nobody knows that.
Mhm.
There are 500,000 other people who look like me. There are 20 million foster care alumni who look like me and other people who have bootstrapped their way to some semblance of dignity.
Right.
You know what? I want the world to know.
Well, we're honored to have you. We are absolutely honored to have you. And thank you for your work. We expect to sell this book heartily and mightily at Source Booksellers. I'm turning it over to you, Allison.
Thank you.
And I'm going to consider everything you said. Please consider. Pause to consider.
Pause to consider. You are so precious. Thank you, ladies. Much love. And see how God works.
Always.
Yes.
Person at Winter Institute, I fell in love with y'all. I think y'all just fell for me too. It was a mutual falling.
Right.
And it took me to bootstrap a possibility to get an editor who had only one other Black author in the 50 years of their existence to create this opportunity to become a metaphysical writer. And here we are. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know what? It's always at the right time.
It is always.
Yes.
Amen.
Always the right time.
And
Thank
so
you.
we are honored that we've sold your memoirs. We're
Yes.
still selling your memoirs, and we're selling this too.
Thank you.
So we got it together.
Janet, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and just before we go, you can find more about Regina Louise at imreginalouise.com.
And the real Regina Louise on
and real Regina Louise on social media, on Instagram in particular.
Yeah.
And we have the books at sourcebooksellersonline.com.
Yes.
And we also have it if you walk in the store.
Thank you.